riddle me this. What is located in Middle E, known to be a warrior nation, don't seem to understand much else than fighting, have dialect differences between tribes, eat horse meat, are angry all the time, hate everyone other than themselves, and rebel against their lords when they cannot afford meat? Okay, the last one is only for the orcs, but if you answered as Turks, that's also correct. And this is exactly why I'm making this video. As you can tell from the intro, this was meant to be a joke video, but the more I spend time on this, the more I realize that there is more to it. Guys, you wouldn't believe how much time I spent on this. Let me show you something. These are my notes, pages and pages. I also have digital notes. I have photos saved on my computer. I read the books, I read critics, I read articles, I read papers from 1976. There's just so much to it, and I think Turks are actually orcs in Tolkien's universe. I categorize my arguments under 4 titles: linguistic arguments, geographic arguments, historical arguments, and finally meta arguments. Linguistic is not too strong, that's why I started making this video. Geographic was actually shocking to me, which kind of proves it in a way, but the strongest arguments are in historical and meta. Before stretching it even longer, let's start with linguistical similarities. Also, I drew this. I think it's funny. Let's quickly be done with the linguistic arguments because they're the weakest, alright? It's just that orc kind of sounds like Turk. Uruk is very much like the older version of Turk, which is Turuk, Uruk. And then Uruk Hai, the Hai suffix that makes it like the people, is similar to Turk, Turkmen. So nothing much here. I also took notes that some words that Tolkien specifically used for orcish armies, like they don't have swords, they have shmitars. They don't have armies, they have horde, which is a Turkic word that means army, but in Turkic. And also when he's describing the final battle, he says, a 4-day-old crescent moon hangs over the citadel of Sauron, highlighting the armors and emblems of the orcish armies. So a 4-day-old moon highlighting scimitars and the red emblems of the orcs. Apart from that, one could say that black speech sounds a lot like old Turkic languages, like ancient Uyghur or Kuman language.
Ashnaz Durbatuluk, Ashnaz Kimbatul, Ashnaz Trakatuluk, Agurzum Mishikrimbatul.
But again, I'm not pushing it too far. Now we have geographic similarities. I was literally shocked. I wish I recorded my initial reaction seeing the map of the Middle Earth. It is a carbon copy of East Europe and Middle East. Instead of the seas that are defining the Turkish borders, it is mountains defining the Mordor borders. And when you go north, you find Crimea, the Tatar steppes or the Eurasian steppes, where in Middle Earth lives the Easterlings, the cavalry people who are divided by many tribes, usually always fighting each other, only united by Sauron for their shared hatred for the West. And if you go to the south, you find Haradrim people, sounding pretty Arabic. There lives the people who have war elephants, a country that looks like Egypt. And if you go to the west, you find Umbars, the Muslim-looking pirate people. Again, Algeria, Morocco. If you go to the west from the Easterlings, the Eurasian steppes end and you see the start of the Russian woods. So in this logic, Rohan matches with Poland, Gondor matches with Byzantium, and Shires, of course, Oxford, Britain. When it comes to big countries like France, Germany, Italy, you might say, where are they? Where is Spain? I think it is completely understandable that they don't exist because they are not integral to the historical battle that the story of Lord of the Rings is trying to replicate. And also, instead of separated political figures, we are seeing a united humanity, Western civilization at the display. But let's talk about that historical battle that the story is trying to replicate. Okay, historical arguments. This is where it gets blatant. I never realized how blatant and obvious it would be. But the more I thought about it, the more parallels I found. And after reading this paper by George W. W. Geib, written in 1976, I realized that even me, as a history nerd who has thousands of hours in games like European Universals or Crusader Kings, even I didn't realize all the parallels. Look, I will not even include everything he says because there's so many parallels. Even the smallest little houses, little characters, they have a match somehow. So I will just go by the main characters. In this parallel, we make Minas Tirith to be a combination of Vienna and Constantinople. Two important traumas, breaking points in the history of Christianity. For those who don't know, Constantinople is the old name of Istanbul. With its fall, Byzantium was ended. The city that was impossible to be taken was taken by Turkish Muslims. It turned one of the most important Christian monuments, Hagia Sophia, into a mosque. Talking about the effects, even the intellectuals from Constantinople who took refuge in Italy started a new era called Renaissance. So it's a pretty impactful, important event. And the other battle is the Battle of Vienna, where Ottomans in their peak was continuing to take more and more and more land from Europe. And they were at the doors of Vienna, the heart of Europe. Because Austria and Vienna, in a way, was the capital of Europe at the time. And it was believed that if Ottomans managed to take it, there would be nothing to stop them from taking the whole rest of Europe. Now we continue with the parallels. Sauron is Sultan Süleyman the Magnificent. Minas Tirith is Vienna. It is the ancient imperial capital. It is close to the eastern borderlands. It stands upon the right bank of a mighty river. It is surprised and outmanned, forced to conduct a near-hopeless defense only to be saved at the last possible moment as a great multinational relief army arrives, similar to that of Europe after Pope Innocent XI's proclamation of a crusade against the Turk. Even the way battle builds up is the same. Orcs cross the Etelduev mountains while Turks go through the Balkan mountains. They go through the Hungarian plains, Italian plains, island crossing of Danube, crossing Anduin at Oskilath. Orcs are with red banners and emblems, very much like the Janissaries who are iconic for their red uniforms. And the Easterling cavalry are Tatar horsemen. Both armies use missile fire as a diversion tactic and actually rely on mining for major assault. Turkish sappers won on the last day of the battle, while Mordor's elf convulsions opened just when the relief forces arrived. Victory comes from the cavalry coming from the plains of Rohan or Poland. Cavalry arrives late because of Wormtongue, or in real life the great treasure of Poland. That's why Theoden is often matched with Sobieski. Okay, while editing the video, I realized that I forgot something. First of all, while in the movies, the leader is Aragon, the exile king, in the Battle of Vienna, the defense is led by Charles of Lorraine, the most famous exile noble of his time. Not as important, but while we have Black Rider leading the armies of Sauron, we have in history Black Mustafa leading the armies of Suleiman. There are some other details like orcs being converted, corrupted elves, while Janissaries with the red uniforms, they are being known to be converted Europeans who are taken by the Ottomans and trained as soldiers. I think Nazguls could also be client rulers, kings who are under Ottoman rule, or maybe from the First World War, the three kings who worked with Ottomans. So there are just undeniable amount of similarities. If you think that I stretched it too much, keep in mind that I skipped half of the arguments. It is just a lot. So now we are switching to the last argument, meta arguments. So let's get some proof from his personal life. Tolkien in his personal letters, you can check this out, it's not one time, it's multiple times, called Gondor as Byzantine. It matches architecturally and geographically as well. In another book of his, The Letters from Father Christmas, there is another good versus evil kind of war. But in this universe, instead of orcs, we have goblins waging war against Santa. And on multiple pages, he mentions the great trouble goblins caused in 1453. Not in the 14th century, not 1450, specifically 1453. The Battle of Constantinople, the fall of Constantinople. He calls it the Great Goblin War of 1453. But he says that goblins were defeated. Like 1453 is not a random word. Every Turk, every Greek, and every history nerd playing Paradox games know this. And I think it's a repeated theme in his universes. He brings the Battle of Constantinople and changes the ending so that it never falls. And lastly, he is a British officer in the World War I. He was stationed in France. He didn't personally go to Turkey and fight, but he was literally in war against Ottoman Empire. Even if he doesn't go and fight, he is obviously under the influence of his country, especially as an army officer. We are talking about Britain who fought against Ottomans in Mesopotamia, Gallipoli, Palestine. So it is only natural that anyone from his time and position would be negatively influenced towards Turks. And before I finish, I think I should answer to one comment that will surely show up. Well, Tolkien personally said that he didn't do allegory. Well, then I say that I did not make this video. Whether you believe it or not is your decision. But there is actual proof showing that he did do allegory, if not the most blatant allegory that I've ever seen. And finally, my opinion on it. I think it is funny, it is cool. It was very fun for me to uncover these things, seeing parallels, sometimes forcing to see a relation, sometimes the relation being too obvious that I cannot unsee it even if I try to. But I think it is fine. Also, it doesn't mean that he was racist against Turks. He could have been seeing these themes, narratives, historical moments, and rediscovering them in the fantasy world. It doesn't mean that he actually hates actual Turks. It doesn't necessarily mean that he hated them, but even if he did, I see nothing wrong with that. Do you think my grandfathers were in love with British at the time? They hated the British. If a British hated them back, I think that's completely fair. But most importantly, if you watched it this far, what do you think? Do you think I lost my mind with this? Do you think I'm pushing it too far? Because ChatGPT literally called me dumb. It said that it's a stupid idea and I should not talk about it. But I think it's a bit too late for that. I will be checking your comments and I think it will be beautiful.